My name is Ansary. I was born in Portland, Oregon at Good Samaritan Hospital in February of 1980. And before Clyde Lewis was on the air, although he was on the air in the early 2000s, but after that, I was on the air on cable access TV from a non-right-wing perspective, calling out the corruption going on with the military-industrial complex, the surveillance society, problems with our healthcare, problems with our educational school system. And back in the day, most of you know, before the rise of Trump, alternative media on the internet was not radicalized. And there were plenty of people on the left that consumed my content during the Bush years. Due to poverty, due to circumstances beyond my control, losing my job at a restaurant, becoming homeless, not being white in Portland, Oregon, not being black in Portland, Oregon, but being of a certain mixed race heritage that a lot of people didn't identify with, even if they were anti-war protests. And so I couldn't make it in Portland, Oregon. And maybe I was meant to leave because what's happening in Portland, Oregon right now is not good. What is happening in the streets and what I would call the demonic influence. But I've been discussing that for years. And back in the day, people would laugh at me for having a spiritual perspective other than New Age, love and light, everything is shifting for the better attitude. Do you think everything is shifting for the better now in Portland, Oregon? Is it really a group of happy, shiny people holding hands? Do you really have people on the air in Portland, Oregon telling the truth about the corruption at City Hall as Wheeler centralizes decision-making, as he centralizes, I believe, the bureaus before he leaves office? How many of you know about Top Off 4, where the military, fear-mongering after 9/11, engaged in an exercise in which they released a fake dirty bomb, and Homeland Security practiced an exercise, frankly, taking over the city? Does that make you feel good? Is that going to make you feel good even more when Trump comes back into power? No, it's not. So I've been notified, I've been contacted by many, many people over the years that have thanked me for warning them about Portland, Oregon. There's one person in particular, and it's because of her, and it's because of another woman who also donated my work when I was basically living off grid in squalor in Colorado, because the people of Portland, Oregon would not have me. Figured I was just some other dopehead in the streets because I consumed cannabis. So while a lot of you in Portland, Oregon, because that's what I want to see, I want to see viewers from Portland, Oregon find this video. Some of you are new to Portland, Oregon, and you don't know what's past, and you're just there for the party. You just moved to Portland like everybody else without realizing that some of us were displaced from Portland, Oregon, and that shouldn't have happened because I tried to help Portland, Oregon, and I told the truth. I never fell into racist politics. I always stood up for people of color, but I never agreed or believed that the answer was burning the city down, engaging in private property destruction, which is happening now. And so I'm making these videos now, and I'll be making other videos public in the future to really shine the light on the spiritual warfare that's taking place in Portland, Oregon. Because if the people of Portland, Oregon were good from a collective level, if the majority of people in Portland were good and higher consciousness, they would have never allowed me to just live in the streets. I sat there on cable access TV and talked about issues regarding Portland. I made the Real Portlandia series. I talked about the Shanghaiing days of the past, and I've warned about Portland's future. In the event of a war with China and Russia, listen to me carefully. You think human trafficking is bad now? These things, ladies and gentlemen, I predicted. And there hasn't been any women from Portland, Oregon that have thanked me for my service. We live in a society where everybody blindly says thank you for your service to people that have picked up guns and murdered people overseas that look like me from my father's homeland. And even though my mother is white and I was raised in a white family, they did not prepare me in Aurora, Oregon as I grew older and lived in Portland, Oregon for the types of racism that I would even face in the city of my birth. And so while a lot of Portlanders want to act like they're all love and light and pushing back against the Trump agenda, where were the Portlanders for me when I needed you? Why is it when I go to Portland Reddit, they remove all my posts? and they don't let me speak. I'm not a typical conspiracy theorist. There is an agenda of control. Do you realize that there is a Russian influence behind Donald Trump? And it's not a good one. Do you know that while I was on the air in Portland, Oregon, I warned of what's to come with China? There's a lot of psychics some of you listen to. There's a lot of you out there that deal with the spiritual and supernatural. But I interviewed someone that accurately gave something, a prophecy, that may potentially come true. Take a look at the news right now. China is threatening America. Russia is threatening America. I've seen many, many trolls during the far right versus far left wars in Portland, Oregon, call for the city of my birth to be nuked. How do you think that makes me feel? To know that so many people in the conspiracy world, which is massive, have turned on Portland, Oregon. Now, this is what I think is a little bit awkward. Your homie on the air, Clyde Lewis, is friends with Alex Jones. He went on Alex Jones years ago. And yet I can't find any criticism of Clyde Lewis on the actual internet from many Portlanders. But yet supposedly you're upset with Donald Trump. And yet Clyde Lewis is behind a lot of the Donald Trump talking points. That's not the Clyde Lewis that was my friend years ago. The Clyde Lewis that was my friend years ago would talk about the bombings of Afghanistan and Iraq. He would talk about the truth of 9/11. He went into some other strange areas that I may not have agreed with, but we had somewhat of a bond. And there's many more things that I'd like to tell you, but it might be going too far. But I will say this is why this video is happening. And if nobody watches this video, then nobody's gonna watch this video. But the reason I'm making this video, and I wanna make more, is this. I wanna help you. You don't have media figures at KBOO or PCM TV or on the radio there in Portland that stand up for Portlanders. You don't have people in your local media that are exposing what City Hall is all about. And so I have experience. And Portlanders didn't help me when I needed employment. Portlanders didn't help me when I needed housing. And to be honest with you, the dating experiences that I had in Portland, Oregon were very heartbreaking. I understand that it's a super promiscuous city, do what you want to do, but there was a real lack of love and compassion and real intimacy when it came to the types of people that I met on Craigslist or other people or people that I worked with. When I worked at the London Grill, at the Benson or the Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, I also worked at Fred Meyer. I also worked at the Rose Garden. I worked plenty of shit jobs back in the day where I can rent a room for $300 or $400. A lot of people have moved to Portland because of Portlandia. And as you know, the cost now is through the roof. So a person like me can't return home and live there and put my show back on cable access TV because the support isn't there. And I'll tell you, it really breaks my heart, Portland, for Portlanders to not remember me, to not remember Alex Ansary. Ask around to the old timers, to the people that have watched Access TV for years, and ask them, have they heard of Alex Ansary? And if they say yes, ask them a second question. Why did you forget about Alex Ansary? And see, that's the problem with today's society. When someone stops broadcasting from either Access TV or some other facility, and they end up homeless, because of the stereotypes about homeless, people just assume they're a criminal or they're on dope. But now I see people in Portland saying housing is a human right. Did you say that housing was a human right when Alex Ansary was homeless in 2014? You left me in the street. You didn't even care. There's a woman that used to come to my meetups. I used to host meetups for anybody in Portland that came across my content to come hang out with me, break bread, and have pizza at a place called It's a Beautiful Pizza off Belmont, which is now no longer there. Maybe I wasn't meant to be in Portland for what is to come. Maybe I'm not meant to come back, but you know, if I was to say that I don't miss Portland, I would be lying to you. Because where I am coming right now to you is in one of America's most dangerous cities. And because I have stalkers, some of which are neo-Nazis, some of which have pledged allegiance to Russia. These people hate Portlanders and they hate people of color. So as a Portlander who's part Middle Eastern, part white, who doesn't support the far-right agenda, but has exposed aspects of the corrupt global government involving China, Russia, and the US, which may be about to go to blows soon. You think this is an accident, what's about to take place in our world? You know there's something not right about what's about to take place. The problem is you're not going to get the truth from Clyde Lewis. You're not going to get the truth from KBOO. You're not going to get the truth from Clyde Lewis. He is there to scare the living daylights out of you. And I have other perspectives on him, but another time. He's not a good man. He doesn't care about the victims of war and the people that have been murdered by the millions. He took the microphone out of my hands at a 9/11 event in 2009, which I thought I was welcome to attend. And I called for a moment of silence for the victims of war that had been murdered. And he snatched the microphone and said, "I'm not going to be silent. I'm going to keep ranting." And I got upset with him. And I gave him a piece of my mind in the way that you gave the federal government a piece of your mind, but without violence. I just used my megaphone. But for those of you that think those of us that don't believe the official story of 9/11 are freaks, that's messed up, because progressives and leftists should have never gone along with that official story. You don't believe the official story when an unarmed black man is killed by the police in many, many cases, and you say, stop killing black people. When have you ever said, stop killing Afghans? And it's because you've never said, stop killing Afghans, stop killing Iraqis, at least in recent years, that in your heart, you never saw me as your brother. When I didn't believe that Obama was going to end the wars, and I saw him for what he was, and that he expanded the drone attacks over Afghanistan and Iraq and other places, including Yemen, I think people held a bias against me. It wasn't fair, man. So here people are saying housing is a human right. Some people believe that everybody that's on dope that came to Oregon, now that Measure 110 passed, and heroin and meth and other drugs are legal, people are calling for all these people to have housing. Who is trying to bring me back to Portland, Oregon and see that I get housing? I used to live off grid in Colorado near Durango. And even though I exposed the far right attacks on Portland, Oregon, and how Alex Jones was playing a role in that, nobody from Portland, Oregon messaged me and thanked me for what I was saying. They were so pumped up in the us versus them, Antifa versus the right, that they didn't have the clarity to see that I was standing outside of both systems, caring about the city of my birth that my father immigrated to in the 1970s. You understand? When my father from Afghanistan immigrated in the late 60s, in the 70s, he had many white, hippie, counterculture friends because 9/11 had not happened yet. They accepted my foreigner father into the bars of Portland and into the restaurants of Portland where he worked. His son, however, who turned 21 in a drug treatment center, getting myself clean, and of course, suffering from that addiction due to child abuse and neglect and trauma. But by 2005, I had Outside the Box TV, and there were people supporting me that didn't like the Bush agenda. And then everything went down when Obama was elected, and people just saw me as a hater because I saw through this draconian system. And there's a lot of you out there that dabble in conspiracy theories, whether you admit that or not, whether it be David Wilcox, Kerry Cassidy, or other individuals. But yet you fail to see in some cases your own white supremacist nature, your own tribalistic nature, to where you act like you're pushing back against white supremacy, but you ignore your boy Alex Ansary, who is straight up from that city. So I know Portland's history, I know Portland's present, and I know Portland's future. Portland, Oregon is going to continue to have problems with human trafficking because there is an evil demonic presence there. That's also why there's a callousness and a rudeness there with a lot of Portlanders. There's a narcissistic spirit that exists in a lot of the people there. But just because I've been burned by Portlanders doesn't mean that I don't sit at night thinking about you and caring about you and caring about the women there. I will never really in this lifetime understand why women have been upset with me for warning them about an increase in human trafficking, because when I warned you about it in 2008 and 9 on the air, nobody called me or messaged me and said, thank you for warning about these possibilities. And then years later, it came out that Portland was #1 in child sex trafficking. And now we look at the possibility of a major war with the East. And if you don't know that that is taking place, if you don't know that the U.S. may be going to war with Taiwan soon, if you don't know that the U.S. may be going to Russia soon, and if you don't know that Portland is a military target, you're not paying attention. There was a time when Portlanders appreciated me and spoke my name throughout the city. And while the world did not end in 2012, it sure seems like consciousness took a nosedive. I had somebody turn in some tapes for me on cable access, and I understand some of you may not have cable. But somebody turned in some tapes where I recorded myself off the grid, and it wasn't in a nice studio, it was in a crappy shed, but at least it was my shed, where I didn't have to have roommates for $500 a month, $600 a month. And I sat all alone on that hill, surrounded by white supremacists with guns, me, someone who had a felony from my drug use in Portland, Oregon, no gun, no friends, no Antifa backing me up. Surrounded by people on the far right, where a local Facebook group, right, was run by a psychopath who glamorized and applauded the murder of Afghanis and Iraqis being killed by drone attacks. See, a lot of you in the future, you're going to act like you're going to be pushing back against the Trump system if he goes for Muslims. But yet you don't know who Alex Ansary is, the only person of my heritage that's in the alternative media that's dominated by whites and blacks. If you care so much about diversity and people that are pushing back against white supremacy, then why have you not heard of me and my content? Do you know about the term shadow banning? Do you know about internet censorship? Do you know that people pushing back against racism and pushing back against hatred are often held back by the algorithm or that which is now known as AI? Because if you don't know that, you're not paying attention. And I have shared so much accurate information with the Portland, Oregon audience. In 2007 and 2008 and 2011, I interviewed Leon Nagant about his visions of America being invaded by China and Russia. And in those interviews, I kept prodding and asking, do you also sense that there's going to be a human trafficking wave in Portland, Oregon? Women being kidnapped when these things hit the fan? And he said, yes, in some areas. And so as I see these stories in the news, a woman being shot in Old Town, other people being killed in Old Town, a man being shot in the head the other day on 10th and Alder, I want to be in Portland, Oregon right now on the air, pushing back against this evil that has invaded Portland because I predicted this. I made videos back in the day about certain areas in Portland that I believed were demonic portals, like 39th and Hawthorne, and the people treated me like I was nuts. Now, to be honest with you, I interpret this judgment as racism because there's plenty of you that listen to white voices and supposed psychics and Clyde Lewis and others on the air, but yet you don't insult them. But yet the guy that was born different, the guy that stands out in a world where there's very few people like me that are born of this combination of genetics, you pushed me out. You insulted me. You trolled me. But you never tried to invite me out for a beer. I remember trying to warn a woman that I met at a bar about what I believe was coming when society collapsed. And she said, we don't need your help. China's not going to do anything to us. You're the bad man. And see, what I know is the truth is that there's a lot of people out there that may be pretty in Portland, that may be good looking, but their spirits are twisted. They aren't good people. Portland is a magical place, whether it's in ancient Lemuria or something. And so there are people that are drawn to the Portland energy, but they're not necessarily helping Portlanders that are from there. They're not necessarily helping out in the independent media, helping voices like mine get on the air. They're in service to self. And I'm telling you, there is more to life than moving to certain cities and making a lot of money and paying high rent and going out drinking all the time and basically worshiping yourself in the mirror, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the prettiest of them all. If you want to advance spiritually, there's a lot of understandings that I have about this reality, whether you call it a simulation or a matrix or whatever. And you're not getting these spiritual teachings from KBOO, from Clyde Lewis, from Lars Larson, and the other right-wingers that are on the air there. And who do you even have on the air there that's a good voice on the left that's on commercial radio? You don't. The corporate interests in Portland, Oregon do not represent you. The people at City Hall that supposedly were voted in by the people of Portland, Oregon, they don't really represent you. Not that I know everybody that's there now, but I'm aware of those that have served over the years. And for those of you that have done your history into Portland, Oregon, there is a long history and legacy of institutional white supremacy. But it isn't just coming from the police. It isn't just coming from City Hall. It lives in the hearts and minds of the people that live in Portland, Oregon, even if they're protesting the federal government and pointing externally out at them. And so it's because of that woman that emailed me, that thanked me for giving her the real information about Portland, Oregon, so she didn't make the mistake of moving there. And others have done so as well. Because you got to understand, not everybody hates Portland, Oregon. Some people wanted to be part of the Portland, Oregon experience, but it doesn't make sense for people to move from all over the country because of a TV show, because they say that Portland, Oregon is the #1 place to move to. And they did that for years and years and years. And why do you think they did that? It was done out of greed. It lined the pockets of the real estate companies, corporations, often owned by the big banks. And now many of you are struggling to survive in Portland, Oregon because of this abnormal popularity. And now with Measure 110 and the many homeless in the street, people that live in Portland, Oregon don't feel safe there. I'm going to wrap things up and I'm going to share a video from Twitter that I saw. And when I saw this video and I saw how it was titled, about the demonic presence in Portland, I think that it's time for me to return to the YouTube after being offline for a number of years and start making videos about Portland again. And I'm going to ask now that if you're watching this in Portland, Oregon, that you email me, that you reach out to me and let me know how you can help me get my voice back on the air in Portland, Oregon, so I can speak to a demographic that's going to be far more receptive to Alex Ansary message than, say, the demographic that I have right now, living in one of America's most dangerous cities. I would love to come visit you if our world is not thrust into another third world war. And even though I want to be in Portland, Oregon, and I would be happier in Portland, Oregon, so I think, Portland, Oregon may be a more dangerous place to be for what is to come than this dangerous American city. Sure, there's shootings and hood rats and catalytic converter thefts, but what I see in Portland, Oregon is also very terrifying. It's not a city that I recognize. In fact, if I were to go back to Portland, Oregon, I would be heartbroken to see what has happened to it. But instead of people just assume that it's the fault of the local governments for not housing everybody, that's a totally unconscious attitude. It's not conscious to assume that everybody who's homeless, who's on drugs, deserves to have a $1,500 apartment or a $2,000 apartment. Don't you think that there should be some balance? Don't you think that if someone's going to be giving some assistance or getting some assistance, that maybe they give something back? Are the people that are living for free in Portland, Oregon right now, in these various apartments, engaged in alternative independent media content, grassroots content to make their world a better place? And I think that's great if you know some folks. Put their names down in the comment section. I'll go watch their channel. I'm sorry, what? You don't know anybody? Why don't you know anybody? Is there something wrong with independent media? Do you really think that everybody's that's outside of the left spectrum is a conspiracy theorist? Do you not understand what it means to be an independent mind, to be totally uncompromised, to not bow down to the military industrial complex and the police state? Because that's the spirit of Alex Ansary. I'm not co-opted. And Joe Biden has harmed Afghanistan by allowing the Taliban to remain in power. I always protested in Portland, Oregon, that they needed to pull out of Afghanistan. But the way that they did it allowed the Taliban to come back into power and use U.S. weapons to harm innocent Afghani people. So if you actually care about refugees and you say refugees are welcome here, why would you not care about an individual like Alex Ansary, who straight up to some people looks like a fucking refugee? So when I travel around America and they see my last name, they treat me with hatred and racism. Even my own audience doesn't have compassion for me when I talk about my life experiences. They want to hear conspiracies. They want to hear about this. They want to hear about war with China. Maybe they want to hear about what I know about solar flares, but they don't really want to hear about what I've been through. And it's not comfortable to have stalkers and to be defamed by people that have straight up made an allegiance to Russia and Adolf Hitler. That shit burns. That shit hurts. Have you been through that? Has Clyde Lewis been through that? I feel a spiritual calling to at least make an attempt to get back on the air on PCM TV. And if you live in Portland, Oregon, you can go down to the studio, you can become a producer, and you may be able to put my show back on the air, but you have to go through a few hoops. It's really not that complicated. Folks, I got off heroin addiction in 2004 in Portland, Oregon, and I didn't need AA. I didn't need Jesus per se. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There certainly is not, but there's a lot of fake Christians out there, so beware. When I got on my soapbox in Portland, Oregon in 2005, I was reborn. To have Portland, Oregon residents appreciating the things that I was saying about these wars warmed my heart and gave me a will to live. Do you understand? And it freed me of that addiction. And when Portland, Oregon turned their back on me, when I became homeless and I lost my job at Ruth Chris Steakhouse, when they fired me 5 years to the day because they only hired tall, beautiful white people, and Alex Ansary, who sweat really hard when he was working, busting his ass, right? It was easy for them to kick me out in the streets. And at that time, with Obama coming in and people believing in the hope and change we can believe in, they saw me as their enemy. How do you think that makes me feel? If you want to help me help you, if you want there to be another voice speaking about Portland, Oregon issues, then I ask that you email me tonight. And I can put together programs and talk about Portland issues and talk about the coming war with China and provide advice for how Portlanders can prepare. Because the vast majority of people in the survival preparedness business don't give a damn about you. They care about your money. And what you need is to build community. Because future generations are depending on the modern generation to do the right thing. And what is coming is horrific. I've said for years that public safety for women is going to plummet in some of these West Coast cities when we go through the collapse. And if you look at the Windows Start app and the news there from Microsoft, if you look at Google News, if you look at Drudge Report, if you look at certain other websites, you can see the threats that are being made against the United States. And I predicted as far back as 2012, 23, that at the peak of the solar cycle, periods in which we see more wars, look at my work on my Substack for more info, links down below. I've talked about this link, and I projected that in and around 2025, we might see some major shit hit the fan. And it literally can happen anytime now. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. Some of you may have researched these things. Some of you may not be blind to the threats from Russia, towards Portland. And I literally give my life to you. I literally have sacrificed plenty of positive things in my life in order to speak these truths. I've been judged. I've been kicked out of homes where I had roommates in Portland, Oregon, where I used to do my online show from my bedroom. People thought I was nuts talking about these future events, and now they're happening. And now they're happening. So I'm going to share with you this video that I saw on Twitter and let you know that this is something that I know a lot about. There is a massive supernatural, paranormal influence over Portland, whether you consider it to be ghosts, aliens, demons, fallen angels, archons. Archons is what I discuss and have been discussing for years in hundreds of videos, along with psychic self-defense, how to protect yourselves from these invasive forces. But if you don't know how to protect yourselves from the evil spirits in Portland and the evil spirits of planet Earth, then you will be affected and attacked by them. Email is solarstorm333@proton.me. Website is alexansary.substack.com.
Weird, but it's scary. It's just scary. I spent a night down here one night with me and my husband. We got stuck with we're going to the Planet Fair, and just like hearing the screams, and screeches and shrills. They weren't just like human screams. They were like guttural, like demonic. And I don't know why people don't see it, but I know it's real with all my heart. I know it's real. I mean, there's just no. People don't bend that way. The way you can't contort yourself in this weird and then stay like that for what the hell is that? You couldn't do it sober, and you couldn't do it normal. Like, it's just demonic, man. It just is. People's limbs are rotting off of them everywhere. Nobody cares. They don't care. And that's not just mental illness. I mean, that goes way beyond that. Walking around with pus, dripping maggots, and they just don't care. They don't give a fuck. It smells like death. Sometimes you walk on this balcony and it smells like death. Several people are losing their limbs and they just don't care.
What you're describing is hell. Literal hell.
What is a zombie? It's a corpse that is animated, right? Rotted flesh, the corpse, I mean.
Damn.
I don't know how else to look at it if that's not demonic. Like, what is it?
Wow.